Hello everybody and welcome back to another Unreal Engine 4 video. In this video we're going to look at setting up physical materials and bullet hole impact decals. So this is not as much of a character setup video anymore, but I think we covered most of that basic stuff and we are going to expand a little bit on what we already did. So let's have a look at setting that up. First thing we need to do is go to our project settings. If you look under Edit, Project Settings, and go to the Engine tab over here. Look for Physics and scroll down. And over here you see the Physical Surface section. You can enter physical surfaces over here and you can use that to have different responses for different surfaces basically. So you can set a concrete, a metal surface, a glass surface, and you can work from that later on. So we are going to add two new surfaces over here. Let's call the first one concrete and let's call the second one metal. And we can save and close this down. Let's save everything and we are going to create our physical materials. I'm going to create a new folder in my content and I'm going to call this physical materials. Open this up, right click, go to physics and select physical material. Select the physical material over here and I'm going to name this physics material concrete and open it up. Now as you can see there's a few different things you can set in here like friction and density and mass to power and some more advanced stuff you can do with it. Right now we are only going to use the physical properties. So over here for the surface type, excuse me, you should be able to select the surface types you set in the project settings, but somehow it didn't update. So let me go back to the project settings over here and look at the physics. Yeah, I did enter them. Let's make sure I entered them and close this down again. Physical material, and they are here all of a sudden. So if they are not popping up in your list, just open up your project settings again and make sure that everything is there. So now from the surface type you can select the concrete one we added and save and close this down. And let's copy this one and call this physics material metal. Open it up and change the surface type to be metal. Save and close it down. Now we are going to need a bullet hole texture for this. I just took one from Google, so if you look over here and look for bullet holes, there's plenty of images out here. I think I picked something like this one or this one. You need to make sure if you imaginary divide the image in equal squares, the bullet holes are each inside of their own square. So basically if you divide the image into equal sections like this, imaginary, you don't really need to do this. Each bullet hole should be in its own nice equal square. So you need to pay attention to that if you pick your texture or if you create your own texture maybe. If you open this texture up, you need to make sure it's set as a power of 2 image size. So resize it to be something like 512 by 512 or 1024 by 1024 or 256 by 256. So make it a power of 2 image size. And I've made the background black and just saved it as a TGA file. And I can import that into my project. So I'm going to create a new folder first and call this bullet holes. And in here I'm going to create two new folders. One is called textures and the other one is called materials. So I'm going to import my texture in the textures folder. Simply drag it in like this. Now we need to change one thing in here. Let's open this up and make sure you disable the sRGB flag over here in the details panel. Save and close this down. And now we are going to create a material for this. So go to the materials folder, right click and select material. Let's call this something like bullet holes, concrete. Oh, my keyboard is screwed up again. Just a second. Bullet holes, concrete, decal material, like this. And open up our new material. Now the first thing we need to do is make a few changes in the details panel over here. The material domain is going to be a deferred decal. The blend mode is going to be translucent. And for the decal blend mode, I'm going to select debuffer translucent color. I'm only going to use a color map. If you use normal or roughness maps as well, you might want to select one of those options. I'm going to simply use translucent color like this. And now let's set up the material. If I hold the 3 button on my keyboard and I click in an empty spot, I get a 3 vector. Double click this and I'm going to set the color for our bullet holes. So this is the metal one. Let's make it a little bit bluish. It doesn't really matter as long as we can see there's a bullet impact over here. So select this one and I'm going to plug it into the base color. Next, in an empty spot, right click and look for a texture object node. So texture object, select the texture object node. For this, select your bullet holes texture in the details panel, and that should be good. In an empty spot, look for a sub-UV index node, sub-UV function, this one. Plug in your texture object into the texture pin over here. Now for the sub-images, we are going to hold down the 2 key on our keyboard and click, so we get a 2 vector. And we need to tell what size we can divide our image in, basically. So if we looked at the bullet holes image, it's divided in 4 by 4 equal sections. So we are going to tell 4 by 4 over here, 4 by 4, and plug this into the sub-images. And for the frame, we want to get a scalar parameter. So right click and look for scalar parameter. And we need to give this a name. Let's call this decal index. And plug it into our frame pin over here. Now from the RGB output pin, you want to drag off and look for a multiply node. Multiply. Plug the result into the opacity pin over here. And for the B pin, you want to look for a decal lifetime opacity node. So drag off and look for decal lifetime opacity. And select this one. And we can use this to smoothly fade out the decal from the blueprint we are going to create later. So that's what this node is doing. And that should be our concrete bullet hole impact material. So let's save this and let's close it down. Now nothing shows up in the preview here. If you disconnect the decal lifetime opacity pin and you compile, you can see something showing up like this. So don't be worried, there's nothing there. It's simply because this node doesn't return any valid values, or it's 0, I don't know. But it's working, so nothing to worry over here. Save and close this down. Now I'm going to quickly add the starter content to my project because I want to use another ImpactFX. So I'm going to select the content pack, starter content, and add it to my project. And then I'm going to go to my character blueprint. So over here, characters, and go to my base character. And I'm going to create a new function in here. Let me close the stuff we don't need. Over here, the functions, create a new function and call this one getImpactFX. So getImpactFX. This is going to have one input, and that's going to be our physics material. So physics material. Oh. And that's going to be a physical material object reference. So physical material, and select the object reference over here. And it's also going to have an output, and that's going to be our ImpactFX. And that's a particle system object reference. So look for that one, particle system object reference, just like this. Let's create a little bit of room over here. And what we are going to do is switch on an ePhysical surface. So if we drag off here and look for switch on ePhysical surface and get this node, you can see our physical materials we entered are in this node, and we can use this to switch our return values. If we drag off our physical material over here and do get surface type, we get the enumeration for the surface type, and we can simply plug it into the selection over here. And now we can return the proper ImpactFX we want. So if we connect the default pin to the first return node, I'm going to select the weapon variable over here. So the CW muzzle flash, CW ImpactFX, and just plug it on like this. So if we are hitting a surface where we don't have any specific physical material set up, I'm going to use the ImpactFX from the info structure or the data table. And for the concrete and the metal, I'm going to use specific ImpactFXs, so I can simply copy and paste my return node and tell what ImpactFX I want to use for what material. So I'm going to use the P explosion from the starter content for the concrete one, and I'm going to use the spreadshot impact for the metal one. So it's just we have different ImpactFXs and we can see it's working. So compile this and go back to our event graph. And we want to look at our events for the ImpactFX right now. So let's look for the play ImpactFX events around here. And let's drag them over to a place where we have a bit more room. Like this. Now for the server play ImpactFX and the multicast event, we need to add another input. So select new input, and this is going to be our physical material. So set this to physics material and select the physical material object reference. Physical material object reference. And do the same thing for the multicast event. So again, add a new input, physics material, and the physical material object reference. For the server event, plug in the pin into the multicast call like this. Now if we go to our bullet hit event function, so over here, open your bullet hit event, look at the hit results, and you can select the physics material that came from the bullet trace, and we are going to plug it into the ImpactFX calls over here. So simply for both of them, the multicast and the server call, just plug in the physics material that comes from the break hit result over here. Go back to your event graph. We can delete the CW ImpactFX getter over here because we are not going to use that over here anymore. Disconnect the execution pin and create a bit of room over here. Now let's drag in our new function, the getImpactFX function. Connect it to the execution pin. Make sure you connect the physics material to the input over here. The ImpactFX output is going to be our emitter template we are going to use for the ImpactFX, and just plug in the execution pin like this. And right now we have an ImpactFX based on the physics material we hit, and it's going to select automatically what ImpactFX to use and play it over here. So that should be good to go. Now let's create a second bullet hole impact material so we can switch between that as well. Let's go to our bullet holes, materials, and just duplicate this one, Ctrl W, and I'm going to rename this bullet holes metal. decal material, open this up, and the only thing I'm going to change in here is the color, so I can see we hit a different surface. I'm going to set this to green and save it just like this. And we can go back to our character blueprint again, open your base character, and we are going to create a function for the impact decals as well. So over here, create a new function and call this getImpactDecal. Again, this is going to have one input, and that's our physical material, and that's a physical material object reference, and it's going to have one output, and that's going to be our decal material, and that's a material object reference. So select material object reference, just like this, create a bit of room over here, and again we are going to switch on our ePhysical surface, so drag off here and do switch on ePhysical surface, get this node. From the physical material we hit, drag off and do get surface type, plug in our surface type into the selection over here, and we can simply return the decals we want to use. So for defaults and concrete, I'm going to use the concrete decal and copy and paste the return node. And for the metal surface, I'm going to use the metal decal and plug it in like this. Compile this, and let's go back to our event graph. For the play ImpactFX functions, I'm going to add the spawning decal behind here, so I'm not going to create a new function for it. After the spawn emitter at location, I'm going to drag in my new getImpactDecal function and plug it in like this. Make sure you connect up the physical material to the physical material from the ImpactFX, the start node. And from the getImpactDecal, I'm going to drag off and do create dynamic material instance. So drag off here and do create dynamic material instance. Make sure you get this one where it says create dynamic material instance, which you can modify during gameplay. So select this node. Notice if you select the other one, it will look different. So if you select something like this, you get the component and stuff like that. You don't need this node, so make sure you get this one. For the decal material, just drop it in onto the parent over here. And from here we are going to say drag off and do set scalar parameter value. So drag off here, set scalar parameter value. Get the top one over here, scalar float parameter value. For the target, again, we need to plug in our, let me double check my impact decal. I am pretty sure. I'm pretty sure we need to, no, we don't need to plug this in over here. We need to plug this in over here. I'm sorry. So the create dynamic material instance, the return value, plug it into the target for the set scalar parameter. The parameter value is going to be our decal index value we set in the materials. So we call that decal index. So that refers to the bullet hole material, to the node we put in here. So it tells to select the image index basically. So that's where that comes from, decal index, and we are going to set a random integer from 0 to 7. So get a random integer in range, minimum 0, maximum 7, and plug it into the value like this. Because if we look at our image and we have our imaginary squares, we can select 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's what we are telling over there. After the set scalar parameter value, we want to drag off here and do spawn decal at location. Spawn decal at location. For the decal material, you want to drag off the create dynamic material instance again, so plug that into the decal material. The decal size is going to be randomized, so I'm going to do a get random float in range, random float in range, and I'm going to set the minimum size to something like 6 and the maximum size to 12 maybe, and just plug it into the decal size. It will convert it into a vector for you, so that should work. For the location, go back to the start node and plug in the location input, and we also have the rotation already converted from a vector to a rotator. Drag off the rotator over here and plug it into the rotation. Lifespan, we're going to leave it at 0 because we're going to fade it out and delete it ourselves, so that's fine. From here, we are going to drag off and say set fade screen size. And we need to plug in the return value onto the target like this. I'm going to leave the fade screen size to 0. That might not be the best thing for optimization, but right now it will simply make sure it spawns the decal no matter the distance we are from it, so we can always see it. Basically, if you're further away from the decal, this will fade it out, so you won't see it anymore. So this is a bit of optimization, but right now leave it to 0 to make sure the decal shows up. And after this, we are going to say set fade out. So set fade out. Select this node. Again, plug in the return value from the spawn decal into the target. For the start delay, I'm going to say get random float in range. And I want the decal to be alive for 10 to 15 seconds and plug it into the start delay. And after that, it's going to fade out, and the fade out it's going to take between 3 and 5 seconds, and plug it into the duration from the fade. Make sure you set the destroy owner after fade to false, otherwise your character might get deleted, so that's not a good thing. So set this back to false. And this set fade out node controls the decal lifetime opacity node we entered in the material over here. This one, so that allows us to fade out the decal, and that's what we are doing over here. So that should be good to go. And after that, we can simply destroy it. It destroys itself. That should be good. Excuse me. So I think we are good to go right now. Let's compile and play this, and let's check it out. So let's get a gun, and if I shoot, you can see my bullet holes appearing, and unfortunately I have my bullet traces turned on, but here they are. So that's our default impact. Let me turn off my bullet traces real quickly, go to the bullet trace event, draw debug type none, and let me put in a different surface in my map. So if I open my viewport, and I'm simply going to duplicate this cube over here. If I select this one and go to the details panel, I can set the physics material override over here, and I'm just going to set the right one to my concrete material and the left one to my metal material, and have a look in game again. Let's pick up a weapon, and if I fire at my concrete, you can see I have my other ImpactFX, which is the explosion ImpactFX, and I'm getting my blue decals. And if I'm firing at my metal surface, I'm getting my other ImpactFX, and I'm getting my green bullet hole impacts. So as you can see, based on the physics surface we hit, it's going to change our impacts. And that's also fading out nice and smoothly after 10 to 15 seconds. So everything is working over here. Pretty nice. Let's check this out in multiplayer, because we need to change one small thing over here. So if I resize this stuff and select my client and pick up my AR rifle. You can see everything looks to be working. We are playing our different ImpactFXs and our different decals are spawning. They are showing up on both screens, so at first sight it seems to be good, but if I'm picking up a shotgun and I'm firing, you can see there's only 2 bullet hole impacts for my client, and for the server there's sometimes more, sometimes there's only 2, so something isn't really replicating over here. If we are going back to our character blueprint and simply set the multicast events for the ImpactFX to be reliable, we should be able to fix this. So set this to reliable and also select the multicast event and set it to reliable. And right now, if we check this out in game, everything should work. So let's resize it again. Get my client and get the spread shot weapon. So I should have 16 bullet hole impacts. And as you can see on both screens, everything is working right now. And the other way around, if I'm the server and I'm picking up a shotgun, you can see all bullet holes appear for both players with the appropriate ImpactFX and the decals, so we have everything working here like we want it to. Okay guys, I think that's it for this video. In the next video we are going to look at blood splatter if we hit a player, so we are going to expand on this a little bit more. Thanks for watching guys, see you next time.